Have you heard about Grok? It's this AI chatbot everybody's talking about, on Elon Musk's X platform.
Yeah.
Today, we're going to be doing a deep dive into a recent article from Bright.nl
Okay.
titled X Chatbot krijgt modus zonder begrenzing voor aanstootgevende content, which translates to, like, X chatbot gets mode without limits for offensive content. And this article was published just today, January 9th, 2025.
Oh.
And it really caught our attention. It seems that X is rolling out a new feature for Grok called, like, Unhinged mode,
Okay.
which is specifically designed to generate content that other AIs, like, might avoid.
It's interesting because this new mode kind of speaks to a larger trend we're seeing in AI development.
Yeah.
There's a growing discussion about how AI should, like, handle sensitive topics.
Right.
And whether it should be programmed to avoid certain types of content altogether.
Yeah.
Grok seems to be taking a different approach.
Right. And it's generating quite a bit of buzz, especially given Elon Musk's own, statements about wanting Grok to be what he calls anti-woke.
Yes. When Grok was first released, Musk was very vocal about wanting it to be different from other AI chatbots.
Yeah.
He wanted it to, like, tackle tough questions,
Yeah.
even if those questions might be considered controversial.
Right.
For example, the article mentions that Grok is already creating political images featuring Donald Trump,
Wow.
something that other AI companies are kind of steering clear of.
So you have this AI that's designed to push boundaries, and now they're adding an unhinged mode that's specifically intended to create content that, might be seen as offensive. I have to admit that makes me a little curious, but also a little apprehensive. What are your initial thoughts on this?
I think it's important to remember that unhinged doesn't necessarily mean harmful.
Yeah.
It could simply mean that the AI is given more freedom to experiment with language and ideas.
Right.
Imagine a comedian who is known for pushing the envelope. Their jokes might not always be politically correct,
Right.
but they can also be insightful and thought-provoking. It's possible that Grok's unhinged mode could lead to some genuinely creative and interesting outputs.
That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah.
Could be a way for the AI to explore humor, satire, or even, like, social commentary in a way that other AIs might not be able to.
Exactly, and I think it will be fascinating to see how users respond to this new feature.
Yeah.
Will they embrace the potential for unfiltered expression, or will they be concerned about the potential for misuse?
And how will X manage that potential for misuse? I mean, the article describes the unhinged mode as an amateur comedian who still needs to learn how to do it. That
Right.
doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it raises some important questions about how X plans to moderate content generated in unhinged mode.
Yeah.
Will there be safeguards in place to prevent the spread of misinformation or hate speech?
Right.
How will they balance the desire for free expression with the need to protect users from harmful content?
That brings us to another interesting point from the article. The data that Grok is being trained on.
Okay.
It seems that they've already fed it all the human knowledge they could find,
Wow.
and now they're moving on to something called synthetic data.
Yes, synthetic data is basically content that is generated by AI rather than by humans.
Okay.
It's an increasingly common approach in AI training,
Right.
and it has some potential advantages.
Yeah.
For example, synthetic data can help overcome biases that might exist in real-world data sets. It can also be used to create training data for scenarios that are difficult or dangerous to replicate in the real world.
So instead of feeding Grok articles and books written by people,
Right.
they're going to start feeding it content that was created by other AIs. That seems like a recipe for, well, I'm not even sure what. It's a little mind-boggling.
It is a significant shift,
Yeah.
and it raises some interesting questions about the future of AI development.
Right.
For example, if AI is increasingly trained on data generated by other AIs, what does that mean for the originality and diversity of its output?
Right.
Will we start to see AIs mimicking each other, creating a kind of echo chamber of ideas?
And if Grok's unhinged mode is trained on this synthetic data, which itself could be unpredictable and potentially offensive,
Right.
what kind of content will it end up generating?
These are all questions that we'll be exploring further as we delve deeper into this topic.
Okay, before we move on, let's quickly recap what we've covered so far. We're talking about Grok, the AI chatbot on X, and its new unhinged mode designed to generate potentially offensive content.
We've also discussed Elon Musk's vision for Grok as a chatbot that's not afraid to tackle controversial topics.
Right.
And the potential implications of using synthetic data to train AI.
Right. Now let's dig a little deeper into this whole synthetic data issue and what it might mean for Grok and for the future of AI in general.
It's important to note that using synthetic data isn't unique to X. Companies like OpenAI, Meta, and Anthropic are already utilizing synthetic data for various applications. It's becoming increasingly popular,
Yeah.
and it's important to understand why.
So if everyone's using it, what makes X's use of synthetic data so different?
Well, in many cases, synthetic data is used to supplement real-world data,
Right.
to fill in gaps or to create more balanced data sets.
Yeah.
But in the case of Grok, it seems like synthetic data is going to play a much larger role.
Yeah.
Remember, they've already fed it all the human knowledge they could find.
Right.
So where do they go from there?
That's right. It's like they're teaching this AI to swim in a pool of content created by other AIs.
Yeah.
And that brings up a question for me. How will this impact the AI's ability to learn and evolve?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And one that researchers are still grappling with.
Right.
Some experts believe that relying too heavily on synthetic data could lead to a phenomenon called model collapse,
Oh,
where the AI essentially gets stuck in a loop, repeating the same patterns and ideas without generating anything truly new.
so instead of expanding its knowledge and understanding, it could end up just regurgitating the same information over and over again.
Right.
That's concerning, especially when you consider the unhinged mode.
Yeah.
What happens if it starts generating increasingly extreme or bizarre content based on this synthetic echo chamber?
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
And it highlights the importance of careful monitoring and evaluation.
Yeah.
As X continues to train Grok on synthetic data,
Right.
they'll need to closely track its output
Yeah.
and make sure it's not veering off into uncharted territory.
Right.
They'll also need to be transparent about how they're using synthetic data
Right.
and what safeguards are in place to prevent, unintended consequences.
Speaking of unintended consequences, I can't help but think about the potential impact on users.
Right.
If they're interacting with an AI that's primarily trained on content generated by other AIs, will they even be able to tell the difference?
That's a really interesting point. As AI-generated content becomes more sophisticated and pervasive,
Yeah.
it's going to become increasingly difficult to distinguish from, human-generated content.
Right.
This raises questions about authenticity,
Yeah.
transparency,
Yeah.
and even the nature of creativity itself.
It's almost like we're entering a new era of information where the lines between human and machine are becoming increasingly blurred. And as we navigate this new landscape, it's more important than ever to be critical thinkers.
Absolutely. We need to be aware of the potential biases and limitations of AI-generated content.
Right.
And we need to develop strategies for evaluating its credibility and trustworthiness.
Right.
Think of it like developing a new set of digital literacy skills,
Okay.
just as we did when the internet, first exploded onto the scene.
Yeah.
We had to learn how to navigate that world,
Yeah.
to separate fact from fiction,
Right.
and to discern reliable sources from questionable ones.
It sounds like we're going to need a similar level of discernment when it comes to interacting with AIs like Grok.
Precisely. And that discernment requires us to be informed,
Yeah.
to ask questions,
Right.
and to engage in thoughtful discussions about the role of AI in our society.
Yeah.
It's not just about understanding the technology itself,
Right.
but also about understanding its potential impact on our lives,
Right.
our relationships, and our culture.
Okay, let's bring this back to Grok and its unhinged mode.
Okay.
How do you see this new feature playing out in the real world? What are some of the potential scenarios that come to mind?
Well, it's certainly going to be interesting to see how users, embrace
Yeah.
or perhaps reject this unfiltered approach to AI content generation.
Right.
Some may find it refreshing and entertaining,
Yeah.
while others may find it offensive or even disturbing.
Right.
It's possible that we'll see a divergence in how Grok is used, with some users seeking out the unhinged mode for its, shock value,
Yep.
while others stick to the more conventional modes for their everyday interactions.
And how might this impact the wider conversation about AI and its role in society?
Right.
It seems like Grok is pushing boundaries, not just in terms of the content it generates,
Yeah.
but also in terms of the ethical considerations surrounding AI development.
It's certainly raising some important questions that we as a society need to grapple with.
Yeah.
Questions about the balance between innovation and responsibility,
Right.
the potential for misuse and harm,
Right.
and the need for transparency and accountability in AI development.
Right. We can't just blindly embrace these technological advancements without considering their potential downsides.
Exactly. And it's not about being anti-AI or, resisting progress.
Mhm.
It's about being thoughtful and deliberate about how we integrate these powerful technologies into our lives and our society.
So what are some practical steps that we can take as individuals to navigate this like rapidly evolving world of AI?
I think one of the most important things is to stay informed. Read articles,
Yeah.
listen to podcasts,
Yeah.
engage in conversations about AI and its implications.
Yeah.
The more we understand about how these technologies work
Right.
and how they're being used,
Yeah.
the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions about how we interact with them.
That's a great point. And it's not just about, technical understanding.
Yeah,
It's also about developing a critical eye, a healthy skepticism.
absolutely. Don't just accept everything you see or hear from an AI at face value.
Right.
Ask questions.
Yeah.
Consider the source.
Right.
Think about the potential biases that might be at play.
Right.
And remember, even though AI can be incredibly powerful,
Yeah.
it's still just a tool.
Right.
It's up to us to decide how we use it
Right.
and how we shape its impact on our world.
It sounds like we're all going to have to become like AI savvy in the very near future.
I think that's a safe bet.
Mm.
The world is changing quickly,
Yeah.
and AI is going to play a major role in that change.
Yeah.
It's up to us to make sure that change is, for the better.
Okay, so before we wrap things up, let's do a quick recap of what we've learned today about Grok and this whole like unhinged AI situation.
Right.
You've been listening to a deep dive into Grok, the AI chatbot on Elon Musk's X platform.
Grok is already designed to push the boundaries of what other AI chatbots are doing,
Right.
tackling controversial topics,
Right.
and even generating, political imagery that others are avoiding.
And now they're rolling out this unhinged mode,
Right.
which is specifically intended to generate content that, might be considered offensive or inappropriate.
Yeah.
We also talked about the use of synthetic data to train Grok and
Yeah.
how that raises some really interesting questions about the future of AI development.
Questions about bias,
Yeah.
originality,
Right.
and even the potential for AIs to become trapped in a kind of echo chamber,
Right.
repeating the same patterns and ideas over and over again.
Right. And we talk about the importance of developing critical thinking skills, of being able to evaluate AI-generated content with a discerning eye,
Right.
and a healthy dose of skepticism.
I think the key takeaway here is that AI is a powerful tool,
Yeah.
but it's just that, a tool.
Right.
It's up to us as individuals and as a society to decide how we use it,
Right.
how shape its development,
Yeah.
and how we ensure that it's used for good.
I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about.
Well, thank you.
I know I'm walking away from this deep dive with a whole new perspective on AI.
That's too.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating and rapidly evolving field,
Yeah.
and it's one that we all need to be paying attention to.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of unhinged AI and synthetic data. Until next time.